Let's move on to talk about the peace negotiations themselves. Christopher Hill represented the United States in international negotiations and in 4 different countries. Welcome to the programme. Can we start with President Trump's extraordinary behaviour and just your thoughts on it so far?
Well, it's a complicated interaction of diplomacy, but also of psychology and campaign promises. He made promises during the campaign to wrap this war up in a day. And so he felt that he could get President Zelensky to go ahead with a ceasefire, when in fact there's really no concept of what a ceasefire really looks like. So Zelensky, who went in there with a different set of politics, and in fact, when you look at how he's doing in Ukraine, he's more popular as a result of this blow up in the Oval Office. So I think there was, in diplomacy, you'd probably say it was a little premature to have this. But in any event, this war is raging, and I think it's appropriate for the U.S. to be involved in, first of all, helping Ukraine, and I hope that that gets going again. But secondly, in looking for a peace track as well. It's always problematic when you're helping a smaller country get through a war to keep a peace track open. So that has to be worked on.
So where do you think Russia's behaviour leaves that peace track? Bloomberg is reporting that Putin has made deliberately unreasonable demands and he's not indicating any interest in peace. So if you were in the room and round the table, what would your advice be to Ukraine?
Well, one note of caution is sometimes when you're at the table, when you're in the government approaching these things, you may have access to intelligence that suggests something different than what you're hearing in the media. I know of zero indications that that's the case. If anything, I think Putin has a history of kind of overplaying his hand, and he may be doing that right now. He may be thinking, I've got the Ukrainians on the back foot, and now is the time to ratchet up my demands. So that's quite possible. But I think it's been important to get Rubio, Secretary Rubio, and the National Security Advisor there. By the way, they are noted hardliners on Ukraine. They've been very much in favor of helping Ukraine. And so if the meeting can go better, I think it might offer the prospect of Ukraine signaling, yes, they want a peace process, but they also want to have this arms relationship restarted.
Realistically, who do you think will end up being part of a coalition of the willing? And also, Christopher Hill, which countries do you think have the hardest sell back home on that?
You know, a lot of countries have hard sells, but I think the Europeans have an understanding that this is Russia's aggressiveness. It has a real, it could be very deleterious for European security and certainly for transatlantic. So I think what President Trump is discovering is that there are a lot of people, including in his own party, who are very much in favor of helping Ukraine. And I think that's come clear even more so as a result of the meeting in the Oval Office. I think the U.S. would look to certain other countries to continue to do what they're doing. And obviously the UK has been one of the prime supporters of Ukraine, but I think we would see that continuing with the French and probably the Germans. By the way, there are other countries that have been contributing. They try to stay off the radar screen, but I think it's a fairly broad coalition. And I think certainly from Trump's political point of view, he wants to be able to say that many other countries are doing this, and we're doing our share, but not more than our share.
I'm interested that you have noted that there are other Republicans within the party who don't agree with President Trump. I mean, to be honest, from where we are watching the situation, if that is the case, Trump doesn't really seem to care. His ability to just say what it is that he wants seems really to be unbounded.
Yes, you know, the Republican Party tends to, in their foreign policy establishment in recent decades, they've tended to just mirror all the other things the Republicans say about Democrats, namely that Democrats are weak. They're weak on budget, they're weak on crime, and they're weak on Russian aggressiveness. So along comes Trump, and he has a somewhat different take, to some extent doubling down on his famous Helsinki meeting with Putin, where he tried to suggest that there was more scope for cooperation than is widely understood. But I think in the light of the continued Russian outrages, if I could call them that, in Ukraine, I think it's a kind of a hard case to make right now. I think Mr. Yermak, who will be at these meetings, will kind of be a little less of a political figure. You have to remember that Zelensky had to show the Ukrainian public that he's tough as nails. I think Yermak, off camera, will be able to discuss all these different tracks. And so I think in terms of President Trump looking at this, he doubles down, but at the same time, he kind of looks at other indicators and realizes he's put himself in a bit of a pickle and has to figure out a way out.
Right. I love your diplomatic phrasing, Mr. Hill. So just the phrase Trump has a somewhat different take, I think is it definitely marks you out as being good at your negotiating job. Were you and I to have this conversation in a month's time, what do you think would have happened by then? What will we be talking about by then?
I can barely understand what happened yesterday, let alone what will happen in a month's time. I believe that the political logic in the U.S., especially so-called blue-collar Republicans, a lot of ethnic Americans from Eastern Europe, would suggest that the U.S. is not going to walk away from this one, regardless of what President Trump may have wanted to do. It will also come clear that Putin is not a serious person on a peace track. So my expectation is that the U.S. will be supporting Ukraine, and with the understanding that I think there needs to be a clearer path to peace. That said, I think the Ukrainians have a very powerful argument that back in 2014, thankfully it was before the first Trump administration, they were told to give up Crimea and all will be well. Well, they gave up Crimea, and of course the Russians came back for the rest of it. So I think that's also a pretty powerful argument. And the last thing, President Trump wants to appear as weak, and Ukraine, I think, is the real test for him on that.
Well, let's talk again in a month. It would be our pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for the time being. Christopher Hill represented the United States in international negotiations.